Hey everyone, welcome back to another day and another 5-minute Bible study. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 15. We're just about halfway through 1 Samuel today. And so that's pretty exciting. It's been a really interesting book so far, and I think the rest of it will be equally as interesting. So let's talk about chapter 15. When did these events happen? Well, this was several years after Saul became the first king of Israel. He became king probably around 1050 BC. So this would have been somewhere between like the years 1040 and 1010 BC, so somewhere in between there. We don't have an exact date. The key characters of chapter 15 are Samuel, Saul, and a guy named Agag. Samuel was God's prophet. He was a judge in Israel. Saul was the king of Israel. He was originally from the tribe of Benjamin. And Agag was the king of the Amalekites, who were the longtime enemies of Israel. And when I say longtime enemies, I mean longtime enemies. We'll discuss that a little bit more in our outline. Where did these events take place? Well, the Amalekites lived in the land immediately south of Israel's land, the Promised Land, between Egypt and the Dead Sea. Samuel is going to have a conversation. He's going to confront Saul about something at Gilgal, which you're probably pretty familiar with at this point. Now we'll skedaddle over to page number 2 and discuss our outline. Verses 1 through 9, God commands Saul to destroy the Amalekites. Samuel told Saul that it was the will of the Lord that he make war with the Amalekites and to destroy them utterly. No human, no animals were supposed to be kept alive. Now, why did God command this? Well, God was going to punish the Amalekites because they had done something in the past that God had not forgotten. Their nation, attacked the Israelites shortly after the Israelites had gotten their freedom from Egypt. And yes, that was hundreds of years before this, but God had not forgotten the curse that he put on those people. I imagine there were probably several other evil things that they had done since that time, but that was the big one. If you want to know more about that, you can read about it in Exodus 17, 8 through 16, and Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 through 19. So Saul obeyed Samuel and the Lord's command. He gathered an army of 200,000 men, and he attacked Amalek, and he defeated them. However, and here's the problem, the dilemma of the chapter, Saul decided that he wasn't going to kill all of the animals and that he wasn't going to kill the king, whose name was Agag. He kept the healthy animals and the king alive and brought them back to Israel. So how is God going to respond? Well, that takes us to verses 10 through 31. God punishes Saul for not destroying the Amalekites. Amalekites, I might have said it both ways. I'm talking about the same people. God was angry with Saul, and he told Samuel that he regretted making Saul king. Samuel was also upset with Saul for his disobedience and his failure to keep the Lord's commands, and he went to confront him at Gilgal. When Saul saw Samuel, that's like a tongue twister. Saul saw Samuel. When Saul saw Samuel coming, he greeted him, in a very friendly way, and he told Samuel, "I've completed everything that the Lord has commanded of me." Well, Samuel disagreed, and he asked him, why was it then that he heard the sound of all of the animals? Why was it then that Saul had kept all of the animals of the Amalekites alive? And Saul told him that, it was because of the people. The people wanted to keep them so that they could offer them as sacrifices to the Lord. But Samuel told Saul that God would have been more pleased with obedience to his commands rather than sacrifices. Saul went on to make some more excuses, but he eventually admitted that he had sinned. He had failed as a leader. And as punishment, God rejected Saul as king. Now, he didn't take the throne away from him immediately, but God was not going to bless him in the same way that he had in the past moving forward, and there was going to be someone else chosen to take his place. As Samuel turned to leave Saul, Saul grabbed the skirt of his robe and it tore. And Samuel kind of used it as an object lesson, I guess. Samuel said to him, quote, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you." And we'll talk about that neighbor in the next chapter. Who's going to take Saul's place now that he's been rejected by God? The chapter finishes up with verses 32 through 35. Samuel kills Agag and parts ways with Saul. So Samuel ended up having to complete the command of the Lord to kill Agag, the king of the Amalekites, and he did that. Samuel then went to Ramah, that's where his home was, and Saul went to Gibeah. There's that dog again. You'll know what I'm talking about if you watched the last chapter. Samuel grieved Saul's failure as king. He didn't gloat in the fact that Saul had failed. He wasn't happy about it. In fact, it really seemed to tear him up, and he was quite distraught about it, because it seems like he really cared for Saul. He wanted him to succeed. He had high hopes for him. Do I have high hopes that this will be the last time that dog interrupts my videos? No. Would I grieve if something happened to the dog? No comment. Now let's finish up with our application section. There are kings, and then there is the King of Kings. Saul was head over Israel, yes, but he was still in submission to God. He still had to answer to God for his actions. All world leaders answer to God, and they retain their positions only by God's permission. We learn about that from verses like Romans chapter 13, verse 1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. The most powerful earthly throne is still a seat of submission to the Almighty.